Are bonds completely safe? Are they like completely safe? This is the question, right? So I always talk about investing in treasury bonds, especially in Africa. So mainly Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, the one that almost messed people up, Ghana. So I would say categorically we have some of the best bond rates in the world, right? In Africa, right? Of course, the rating and stuff like that. So they are probably not rated as the best bonds, but yeah, we still have the best rates anyways. But is investing in bonds the safest thing? I know we always talk about bonds being safe investments, being good investments, something I encourage a lot of people to do, and being very easy and efficient to actually get involved in. But are they all safe? Now, in this video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to have a deep dive into what are some of the things you need to consider if you're going to be investing in bonds. And right now, as we speak, there's an amazing bond on offer. I'm going to show you the details here, but we never actually talk about the risks around bonds. I tell my clients all the time that anytime someone is selling you an investment, and if it's a good investment, if the deal is good, make sure you ask the question, what are you getting out of the deal? You have to ask what that person is getting out of the deal, not just you. Nobody's out here trying to make you money. So what are they getting out of it? If the deal is sweet, ask, what are some of the other, the terms and conditions of that particular deal. It's the same thing. Bonds are good, really amazing investments, give you really good returns, but what are the the downsides of bonds, and what are some of the things you should actually watch out for now? And why am I doing this video now? I'm doing this video now because there are certain things you need to watch out for if you are investing in bonds at this particular time. And I thought, what, people might just take my word for it and say, hey, bonds are just safe. Someone new might not understand that, they just get into it, but there might be certain issues we need to be aware of before you get involved in bond. As usual, here at MoneyMatters, we talk about the money mindset, how to make that money, how to manage that money, how to enjoy that money, how to invest that money, and how to assure yourself of a lifetime of income, basically financial freedom. Let's get into it, guys. So there's an amazing bond on offer. Bonds are offered every single month. I think twice a year we do have the infrastructure bond, which is an amazing bond, which is the one on offer right now. Tax-free bond, right? And everyone is running to invest. But at the time when everyone is running to invest, you also have to ask yourself, what are some of the risks of this particular investment, especially with bonds? We never really discuss the risks. So what are the risks with bond investments? But before we get into the risks, let me get down into some of the details of the bond that is being offered now, which is an amazing bond. So as you can see, we have the bonds on offer, the bond on offer, not the bonds on offer. The bond on offer now is the infrastructure bond, 6.5 years. It is infrastructure, so no taxes. The government is seeking to raise around 50 billion from this particular auction or this sale. And you can see the details here. The Republic of Kenya, of course, 50 billion is what they are seeking to raise. 6.5 years. The coupon rate will be market determined, meaning, of course, people will bid and they will come up with an average out of the bids, and that will be the coupon rate, and that's the interest people will be paid essentially on their money. Period of sale is between 20th of October to tomorrow, at the time I'm shooting this video, on the 7th. The value date will be 13th. That'll be on the Monday. Then we need to make payment on Monday as investors. The minimum amount for this particular one is 50,000, and these are the interest payment dates from the 13th of May next year. We get our first amount of money. Those will have invested in this bond. Okay, the redemption dates, as you can see, there's a redemption structure. I won't get into all these details. I've done this video on bonds and how on all these redemption structures, redemption dates, and amortization. I've done all these things. So again, you can always invest on your own. I've also done a video recently on how you can simply open an account using the DAO CSD, the DHOW, the DAO or the DAO or the DAO, whatever it is, the DAO. The maximum amount you can invest per CDS account is 50 million for non-competitive bids, and for competitive bids is 2 million per CSD per tenure. So non-competitive bids in this case are just going by average. Competitive bids, you go and tell them how much you want to be paid on your money. Okay. The auction date is here. The results will be announced on that date. All defaulters will risk whatever, all those details, blah, 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 blah. But this is the bond currently on offer, an amazing bond we are looking at an interest rate of around 17%. If it falls below that, it will be around 16.6.7. But there are people even bidding at 18% for this particular bond. So don't be surprised if we end up with 17.5, 17.8, whatever. I did go for competitive last time. This time I'm not going for competitive. I'm doing easy. I'm going for average. Anyway, this is the bond on offer, and these bonds are offered every month. Not the infrastructure. Infrastructure is like twice a year. If it's a really good year, then 3 times. If they need money, that is. But most of the time, twice a year. So the next one we're looking at probably around March, April. Not sure when. We will just see. But every single month, there will be a treasury bond on offer, right? So, yep. Let's get back now to our video and talk about the risks that I wanted to talk about on this video. Now that you've seen the bond on offer, and yes, you can still go and invest. Hopefully, you get to see this video before that. If it's past this, wait for the next one. You've seen the kind of bond that is on offer at the moment. You've seen the details of the bond, the infrastructure bond, which is an amazing bond. This time I'm talking about the risks because of how the government has been and what's happening with our debt. Now, the bond is a debt security. So most of the time when the government come and ask you for money, they want to meet a deficit in terms of budget. The thing is, we are at a risk of defaulting on some of our external debts. This basically has an impact on how we function internally in many ways. So if in any case we default on our debt, which we have a Eurobond debt coming up in June of 2024, it's going to be maturing, so we need to complete that payment. We still are out of that payment by $2 billion, which needs to be paid. Now that money of course comes out of the budget if the country can raise that money, and of course at the same time there's the amount of that we pay for servicing the debt. There are other debts, like hundreds of debts that we are paying for. So the government gets to a point whereby it might default. We've seen what happened with Ghana. Ghana defaulted recently. They're still going through what we call debt distress restructuring, and it's been a long process, not an easy process. Sri Lanka went through the same process. I think they've finished that DDT. And then we had at some point we had Venezuela. Zambia has defaulted on debt as well. Ethiopia has defaulted on debt as well. So yes, debt default happens. A country can get to a point whereby they cannot pay their debt. It's just like any individual being in a position whereby you cannot repay your debts on time. So there has been, a bit of jitters among investors that Kenya is at risk of debt default. What are they looking at? For example, they look at your debt to GDP ratio, which is a very important metric. Debt to GDP meaning like if they take all your GDP, how long will it take you to pay your debts? So it's just like your income as an individual towards your debts. So like, how are you faring on? If you're on the negative, it's a really bad thing for you. If you're in the positive, it's a good thing, but how positive, right? So if you're like 89% or 90% debt to GDP ratio, that's very high, right? It means all your GDP if collected could actually go towards almost all your debt, which doesn't make sense because it means you are remaining in a position whereby you actually cannot sustain yourself. Kenya has been at a risk because it's currently hitting 70% of debt to GDP ratio, which is now getting to that red zone, right? Being at around below 60%, 50-something percent is okay, and Kenya has managed to be stable at that level for a while before Uhuru, took lots of debts, and of course Ruto has taken debts as well, going to almost 1.7 trillion within the period he's been in power. If we look at these metrics, we look at our collections, we look at the changing interest rates right now, which are like crazy going high, we are seeing a risk of default. But we still need to be optimistic about this because the president has said, and the politicians, which we should not believe, that we're not going to default. And some people say, oh, we should believe the president. Yes, we should, but if that person or that president is very truthful and has been known to be truthful. Kenya isn't very clear on how it's going to manage the debt. It's not clear on how they're going to pay. They're constantly saying that in a good place, but again, we've seen politicians say they're in a good place until the last minute when you realize things are not actually in a good place. So it's good to be aware once you're investing in this debt that there is a possibility that if they default on the debt, it affects you domestically. It means there will be people coming to help the country get out of the debt, and they will come with conditions. Conditions come in such as what we call haircuts. Haircuts is whereby the government decides, every single person who has a bank account, we're going to take this percentage of that bank account. There we suspend the interest payment on accounts, and we also suspend interest payment on any domestic debts. Basically, all the bonds that you're holding, we say, we're not going to pay you any interest for the next 3 years, or we're going to pay you 2%, 3%, then back to normal. depending on the negotiations around the debt restructuring, it can be really tough. Haircut can also involve taking the part of the principal amount. So if you had 10, 15 million in there, they take like say 10%, 20%, depending on what the negotiation has agreed to. So it can actually be very stressful and very scary for investors to go through debt restructuring. It's not an easy thing because every debt, including some of the domestic debt, will have to go through debt restructuring. Of course, there will be a decision on which ones are going to go through debt restructuring. Sometimes countries have gone through this process, and the only debts that get restructured are the debts attached to that default bond or default debt. So could be people who have invested in the euro bond could then be affected. So these are some of the things that you would want to think of once you invest in government, because a government can default to pay. Now, despite the default to pay the international debts or loans, they could also default to pay internally. They could just not have enough money to pay, whereby debts are soaring, interest rates are crazy. Like right now, we are asking for 18% plus. They have external debts that they need to service, and probably they decide that, no, what we're going to prioritize external debts because we do not want to be locked out of the international capital markets. What happens? They decide, okay, we are going to restructure domestic debts, or have a negotiation or a talks with the local investors to find ways in which you can suspend their payments or reduce their principal amounts and stuff like that. So things can happen, and these are things that you need to be aware of, especially at a time whereby the economic environment has become extremely unstable. Unstable here means the Kenya shilling has been getting really weak. Right now, we're exchanging it for 191 to pound, 151 to dollar. That's crazy. So you want to be aware that this changing economic environments can also affect you. That means you need to have some liquid money somewhere, some money that you don't want to fix long term. So again, when you're investing in bonds, the risk is usually you are investing long term. So you're investing for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And within that period, you never know what happens. And these are some of the things you should be aware of and ready for at any point. So I know most people will be asking probably, okay, what is our debt at the moment? What is maturing? How much can we collect? At the moment, Kenya has a debt of almost 10 trillion in total. That's all our debts, like to everyone. We owe China, I think, the largest amount, with crazy amounts that we pay in terms of servicing that debt to China. I think almost 376 million was actually used to service that particular debt, not just paying towards the debt, but servicing the debt itself, which is crazily high. Anyways, we are hitting 10 trillion, which is the debt ceiling in Kenya right now. The MPs did vote, I think, to change the debt ceiling so they make it proportional to the GDP of the country, and that has not been passed yet by the Senate. So right now we have a debt ceiling that they shouldn't overgo. I wait to see what will happen in the next few months or few years. I don't know. The other thing is that our target for KRA collection, the tax collection, has gone higher based on the taxes that have been introduced in the country. So now they are looking to collect almost 782 million this particular financial year. I think that's a good amount and can help us, go towards the debt. 2 billion in terms of the maturing debt, I do not think is a problem. So no need to worry so much about that. I do trust that they will be in a position to pay, because the impact of not paying is so huge to the economy, to the local investors, to the external investors. It's not something that a country wants to go through. So it's just something to be aware of. But with the 2 billion maturing debt, according to the debt management website, they have made it clear that the 2 billion has been calculated in the current financial budget, and therefore it will be paid in time. That should be June next year, June 2024. So if that is paid, then we're safe. But still, even if that goes through, always be aware that once you're putting your money in government bonds, be ready that anything can happen. Economic environments change, political situations change. The Kenya shillings has been falling crazily, interest rates have been rising. The general global economic environment hasn't been the most predictable. In that case, you want to be aware that you want to have some liquid money. That's why I talk about money market funds, for example. You want to have some money there that you can use, have some money in your account, have some money in stocks. Diversification then comes in. So basically, the main thing here is to ensure that you know exactly how much you're investing, how much you're comfortable giving the government, and the possible scenarios with regards to your investment. I hope that's been helpful, guys. Until next time, I'm out.